Hello everybody, welcome back to Rule the Roost podcast. I'm just going to jump straight in. Ben Haines, welcome back mate. How are you doing?
Hey buddy, how are you mate? You okay?
I'm all good mate. I'm all good. I liked your little kind of Wallace and Gromit style picture of you and Rob.
It's so nice.
On
I
Twitter the
love
other
that
day.
man. I can't listen. I hope he's not listening to this. It's so embarrassing. But I'm literally his number one fan. I just every time, for people that don't know, I'm talking about Rob Daly, the club commentator. But every time we have a big moment now, I prefer listening to Rob's comms to anyone else's.
Do you know, I don't want to blow too much smoke up his arse, but he's got the kind of like, he's a man unto his own. That's the important thing. But he's got that kind of like, he's almost got an air of a young Drury about him.
Doesn't he just?
It's poetry, but there's emotion. He loses himself. And that's the important thing. He's not worried about people kind of thinking, oh God, Rob Daly got a bit carried away there. He gets carried away, you know?
Well, there's so many of the moments whenever I kind of watch stuff back, and particularly with the North London derby coming up this weekend. I know we'll probably all watch like a million highlights back of that before the weekend, and Gareth Bale retiring exactly the same. I'm so glad that they're in that season, for example, where we were behind closed doors, that he was on the comms for some of Bale's goals. Because it makes it so special still that you've got this like awesome sort of like really kind of vivid, lively, sort of really punchy commentary, even when there was a time when there was no fans there. Of course, accompanied by the sound of Darude Sandstorm.
I was literally going to say I don't want to do Rob dirty, but Sandstorm helped. I'm not going to lie. I'm up for running a campaign. Honestly, I know people talk about like goal music being tin pot and all that. I'm up for having Sandstorm at League Cup games. I'm just saying. I'm up for that.
League Cup is as far as you would go?
That's the line for me.
If we're in the Europa League, would you allow it?
Okay, yeah. Well, no, Europa Conference League. There we go.
Conference.
We'll settle on Conference League.
Imagine that there was a tier system for goal music. It's essentially like the 2020 of football, isn't it? You're allowed it at Europa Conference League.
Tin pot celebrations for tin pot competitions. You know?
You taking is that Vinicius catching strays there?
Yeah. He might well be. But I'm up for that. Love a bit of Rob Daly, love a bit of Sandstorm. Let's just fucking get it all back in the mix. Man. Do you know what? Let's not have fans in the ground anymore. All they do is boo and say offensive things. They don't need to. Do you know what I mean? And then posture on the internet. Oh, I went to this many games. Don't care, mate. Do what?
Yeah, and listen, and that's particularly sort of important for you, because I noticed that anytime there's a train strike now or shit traffic, you essentially can't go to the games anyway.
Yeah, I know. I actually had a ticket lined up for Crystal Palace away. How shit is that? But the thing is, when I couldn't go anymore, I was just like, it was shit anyway. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, it's not so bad. And then watching that unfold, I was a bit like,
that would have been great. Yeah, it's like one of those ones where you see all the players going to celebrate in front of the fans, and you're like, that would have been you in the front row. Lucas Moura would have been ripping your hat off and throwing it on the ground.
Oh well, at least they won. I would have probably jinxed it anyway. That's what I tell myself, you know.
Yeah, I always do that. I'm so weird with that sort of thing. I'm proper butterfly effect. I always convince myself that on some level I have some impact when I have, of course, absolutely none. But the thing was with the Palace game, like the annoying thing about missing that one, obviously, is like that's about for 45 minutes. That's about as pure as it's been. Like that's about as pure coys as it's been all season.
It was pretty mad, wasn't it? I have no idea where, even like Matt Doherty popping up with a goal. You know, it was one of those nights. You're like, go on then.
I'll have a bit of that.
Are we like? We'll switch back to Portsmouth. Obviously, you were there in a work capacity. There in your full garb. Are we allowed to talk about the little incident that occurred?
I'm desperate to.
With some South Coast barnacles.
Well, like I mean, you know the story, right? So there was train issues, so that meant that 9,500 Portsmouth fans had to get the coach up to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which is notoriously one of the hardest stadiums to drive both to and away from in the country, or probably in the world. And so I would park my car in the car park. I thought something's a bit off today, because I'm having to park absolutely miles away, and it's of course because there's about 100 coaches parked in front of me. So I get out of the ground and I'm in my sort of Spurs get-up, because I sort of have to wear the clobber for the for the show. I sort of get halfway back to my car and there's all these Pompey fans just looking sour-faced out the window. And I'm just trying to see like what was going on. And then I just catch glimpses of them. They're all giving me the V's, the wanker sign out the window, like heckling at me. And at first I was a little bit like, what did I do? And then suddenly there's just wave of just pure like, oh my God, that's what it feels like to be the ones smiling at the end of the game as the other lot have to do a 3-hour coach drive all the way back home, knowing they've been unceremoniously punted out of the FA Cup by a grubby 1-0 win at Tottenham. Like, that is just like delicious for me. Absolutely delicious. So it was pretty grim, but it was lovely at the same time.
I wouldn't for a second suggest that, there aren't lots of Portsmouth fans watching Ed17 live week in, week out. But in the off chance that they're not, do you think there's any chance, Ben, that they might have just thought you were like some full kit wanker? That you were a bit of a tie from Arsenal Fan TV. They were like, look at him. Look at him, he's even got the big caterpillar coat on.
Where's your water bottle? Yeah, like, do you know what's really funny is I then went past Alfie Devine in my car.
Did you?
Like, at least have a go at him. Look, I felt like that David Brenton.
Was his mum driving him home?
Mate, it wasn't him driving home. So I think it's someone actually chaperoning him back home to make sure he got back in time to do his homework. But I was sort of thinking, well, why are you shouting at me for? Have a go at him. He was on the pitch, for God's sake. But yeah, it's so funny, and it was such a that win itself. I know. That we can go into later on, but I just love the FA Cup, and to me it doesn't really matter too much the fact that we didn't absolutely pump them. I want to see us win it this year, and I think it's such a good opportunity. I was sort of going through yesterday. I think it's 8 or 9 teams are already out, with the possibility now of 2 more going out because Liverpool have got a replay against Wolves, and if Arsenal win on Monday night, it means they play Man City. And then if you think about the teams that are left in it, how many of them are you genuinely fearful? If we were to draw any team at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, how many of those are you genuinely fearful where you think, oh, they're probably going to knock us out? Like, this is an unbelievable opportunity now. And I make sort of no apology for being ruthlessly optimistic at a time when I know there's like a huge culture war going on and there's that complete binary sort of go or fraud thing about everything that's happening across the football world. I'm just massively optimistic about the FA Cup because I think genuinely we could win it this year.
I honestly think, obviously there's always going to be kind of bleed through on, as you talk about, like, and I don't want to talk about it today, I can't be bothered. Like, Palace was such a ride. It's nice to be in the FA Cup, and with the FA Cup, to me, it's almost like it's a nice sort of like sanctuary from the horrors of league football.
Oh, it's an oasis, isn't it?
The narratives around football and the, like you say, Messi, Ronaldo shit and Haaland and Mbappe, like all of that shit. Just the good old fashioned FA Cup. It's just something nice about it. It's like a nice piece of just like, in a world now that's full of like buffalo chicken wings or pulled pork or all these kind of artisan hipstery foods, the FA Cup's just like a nice piece of bread and butter. Sometimes it's just what you're in the mood for.
Listen, there's nothing wrong with meat and 2 veg.
Yeah, exactly. But it is, I can't believe, and I'm not turning this into a culture, but I can't believe we haven't fucking won it. I haven't even been in a final. We haven't even gotten to the final since 91. Or 90, was it 90 or 91 now?
91.
91, yeah.
Yeah, 91. And then we had the semi-final against Portsmouth where Dawson sort of slipped over because the pitch was cut to shreds by whatever had happened.
Semi-final against Arsenal at Old Trafford.
Yeah, we had the Newcastle semi-final where Shearer scored twice against us, and we had the Delhi
Chelsea
semi-final with the floss, and then everyone being like, you shouldn't do the floss, and then we got pumped, and I was like, it don't really matter if you do
and then
the
they just brought Hazard off the bench, and he was like, yeah, go
exactly.
on then. Yeah.
And like, didn't Sonny make like a 30-yard slide tackle that led to a penalty?
Yeah, well, because he was playing left back though, wasn't he?
Left wing back. I
love your Poch, but mate, that was not one of your finest. That was not Poch's finest hour, was it?
What are you doing?
It was a weird one, that. And it was Chelsea before, remember, and they were in horrible form.
Oh, the worst.
And Drogba like managed to bang one in from just a ridiculously acute angle.
Didn't he beat Ledley? He sort of shrugged Ledley, didn't he?
But the annoying thing is, remember that we had like literally like a goal that had got, if VAR had existed or goal line technology had existed, we were 1-0 up, and then we had a stonewall penalty as well. Not given. I'm not bitter about that day still, but a stonewall penalty not given that day, and then they went and beat us. What was it, 4-5-1 or something like that? I think.
Well, then we sort of fell apart a bit, didn't we? But we like, I always tell myself that it's just totally irrelevant. The scoreline is kind of irrelevant because even if you look at that England, remember the England World Cup game where Lampard scores and they don't give it, and Germany go on to pump us. I'm like, it's a different game. If the goal goes in, you can play a totally different game plan. It's exactly the same with Spurs. I mean, we've had so many of them over the years.
Do you know what I remember so acutely about that Chelsea game? Is it the first one, the Drogba one? I just remember it being toward the end of the game, and most of the Spurs sat in Wembley. Most of the Spurs fans, not many had left actually. We were still sat there just taking our medicine, but people were pretty much quiet. We were just sat there seeing the players had given up, and just hearing ringing out from the Chelsea end, Tottenham Hotspur, you'll always be shit. And you're just having to sit there just like,
no.
Oh, God, we are, aren't we?
This time around, I've got nothing to come back to you at.
We are always going to be shit, aren't we?
And I know you and I talk about it all the time, but losing to United in the semi-final as well.
That was the most painful one. No, well, in a different way, but
because that was when I was like, we're actually better than this lot. And I remember you saying to me on the walk down sort of Wembley Way, you were like, yeah, but the problem is, Ben, they've just got this grubby, horrible thing where their entire club, the fans, the players, whatever, the roots of the club know how to do these days. They know how to do it.
The equation there is, right, coming at that from a Spurs fan, I mean, this isn't an equation, this is just me talking, but is us turning up, being the objectively better side than Manchester United at that point in time, but still the fans saying, well, it's an FA Cup semi-final, it'd be nice to win it, and I think we can probably beat Man United. We are better than them this time. Manchester United fans, Manchester United as a club, approach that and say, oh, Spurs in the FA Cup semi-final, yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, who are we playing in the final?
You know? And it's Man United though, man. At the end of the day, they still have that. And this is one of those things I've spoken about before, about why is it that Arsenal still managed to win it? Because I just think it is in the heads of their opposition as much as it's in the heads of the players, that sometimes they're just like, I play for Arsenal, I play for Manchester United, or the opposition will say, at the end of the day, it's still Arsenal, so we've got to be careful. And they'll probably play in a more guarded fashion, as opposed to Tottenham Hotspur, who always bottle it, who, if we go out, they'll lose their arses and they'll fall to pieces. It's just, it's all, and this is more what I consider a DNA of sorts. I don't buy that DNA as something that comes from the club itself. It's more like an aura, I feel.
No, I agree.
Because I don't buy this. Like, you can't have a turnover of squads playing stuffs and say, oh, it's in the DNA of them. That's not Kulusevski.
What's wrong with his DNA?
Yeah, what DNA has he got that's Tottenham? It's ridiculous. But
can I just say on that one of the things that I also despise is when people flip it around and then turn it on the fans and says, oh, it's the fans, they come in with the wrong attitude and stuff. It's got nothing to do with one individual thing. It's like you said, it's a weird bubble and a weird aura that surrounds teams on big occasions, because it starts from the week before. Like, Spurs have never had any problem playing against Arsenal at home, or particularly over the last sort of 10, 15 years. So coming into this game, playing against Arsenal at home this weekend, even though they're the form side, there's going to be so much narrative this week about, yeah, but Spurs at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium or White Hart Lane. Do you know what I mean? And it becomes part of the kind of general consensus or the general consciousness that people just have that dialogue. And over time, it's become this thing about Spurs in cup competitions that they get late on in it, and then it might all fall apart. And that's why I think this time around, we just need the stars to align a bit for us. We need the draw that usually Man City get. We need that draw right the way through to the semi-final, where invariably we'll have to play someone who's a little bit more difficult and a bit more punchy, and we'll have to do that what we did to Arsenal in 1991 and put on the sort of the game of our life, get through it, and then hopefully sort of sneak it in the final. But there's no reason why we shouldn't do it this year. We're the fourth best team left in the competition, maybe the third best team left in the competition after like Arsenal or City go out. I'm desperate for us to win it, mate. I love it as a competition so much. Like you said, it's just such an oasis in a desert of absolute football nonsense. It seems like at the moment with the Qatar World Cup and everything that's gone on over the course of the last couple of years. The FA Cup is something really, really pure to be savoured. Not just because of the whole magic of the cup thing, but just because it's something a little bit different that hasn't fully been destroyed.
If anyone wants to get a flavour for this kind of this unbridled passion and joy for the FA Cup, Ben and I actually worked on a series a few years back called Year the Underdog. Search Year the Underdog and probably Ben Haines or 90 Min on YouTube and just watch it. You can watch it back. It was like the ultimate football road trip, wasn't it, Ben? Really going up and down the country. Seemed every other week, going to all manner of different grounds, and it was, I don't know, I felt reconnected with the cup making that, and since then I've always just been so desperate to see Spurs win it again, because I think I'd gotten so lost with the idea of just like, we've just got to get in the Champions League. We have, from the dross that we went through in the early sort of Premier League years, to then having that Yol near miss, Lasagna Gate, just being like, we're fucking never going to get in the Champions League. I don't care, just throw all the other competitions. I just want to say one time in my life I've seen Tottenham in the Champions League. Hear the music, see the big star ball thing at the centre circle. And yeah, I still love that. It's the ultimate football for me. But then suddenly I was like, right, I've got more capacity now to actually start to like dream and want to see us like, because I can't stand the League Cup. To me, it's just like, I don't care. We could write that off every year. I'm not asked about it. I don't buy the whole kind of thing of like, oh, you got to start from somewhere. Nah, bollocks. Get rid of it. FA Cup though is a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, you know? and do you know what? It's so true what you said about the Champions League music and the star ball in the in the centre circle and the light show and it being on sort of like cold evenings in autumn and stuff and under the lights, all of that, and the plain white kit, of course. But one of the things this year that I found really interesting, we did the pre-match shows, and then I went and stood by the side of the pitch for the music. I was like, I can't wait to hear this again. And I had this very strange kind of experience where I was like, well, that's nice. Like, it's nice to hear the music again. And I sort of walked inside feeling a little bit almost flat. And then I realised it's because I think Tottenham are a Champions League club now. Yeah. I don't go like, God, we're just so lucky to hear the music.
Yeah,
I'm like, no, we're a big Champions League club. We hear the music and then we get down to business and get through to the knockout stage.
Big chopper energy, that, mate.
Yeah, that's really big chopper energy. Like that big chopper energy when we went to Marseille and got the business done. Then that was like, I remember listening to your pod after that, and you were so pumped, and I was like, yeah, that's Tottenham in Europe. That's what it's all about.
That's what we are.
It's that we're meant for that sort of big stage, and I think the FA Cup, if we win the FA Cup, it will be like that feeling the first time that we were at White Hart Lane and we had that Champions League run then, and we got all those special nights again. Winning the FA Cup will be that feeling again, like we're back where we're meant to be.
Well, let's talk about the game against Portsmouth, because I saw, obviously, as people do, a few complaints about the game, but I thought it was fine. The fact it was a kind of like a makeshift side with good few young players thrown in there, players without masses of experience, players who haven't all played together very well. Upsets happen in the FA Cup. It's the magic of the FA Cup. There's banana skins, all that type of stuff. But it didn't happen. They got the job done. And okay, it wasn't barnstorming. It wasn't the most beautiful game to watch at all times, but I felt that everybody did their job really well. And yeah, okay, it took a screamer from Harry Kane, as it often does, to make the difference in the end. But like, why is that? That's what Harry Kane's job is. Like, literally, his job is to score goals for Tottenham. So I don't understand why that is then held up as like, a criticism of like, oh, well, we had to have Harry Kane to score and save us. I mean, yeah. Like, have you been watching? Like, that's how it goes.
Yeah, but I think your point about there's upsets in the FA Cup. It just makes sure it's not you.
Yeah.
You know, just like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you win
Arsenal
7.
tonight.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter whether you win 7-0 or lose 4-0 like Chelsea. Just make sure that it's not Spurs. You know, we go through to the next round and then we'll go. Is it Preston away? Like, get through that one as well. I don't care if that one's 1-0. Like, there has been a lot of discussion, hasn't there, over the last few years in terms of like playing style, and I think. You won't find anyone who will sit there and say, oh no, I prefer it when Spurs grind and nick a goal from a set piece as opposed to the way that we finished off Crystal Palace the other night. Oh. But in the cup, like, getting through to the next round is everything. Like, just nick through into the next round. And I actually, do you know what? I watched the game. I'm not very good at being balanced when I'm watching Spurs games. I'm not very good at sitting there and saying, like, well, how is this game playing out? I watch it solely through the lens of Spurs. What are we doing? How are we playing? And it was only after the game where Rob sort of came down from the commentary box and said to me, like, mate, actually, like, Pompey were really good. Like, they, in terms of their like defensive organisation, yes, we couldn't break them down. And yes, we were really, really struggling to play through them. But with our sort of playing style, that's what we struggle the most against. You know, we really, really struggle when teams sit in and make it difficult to get through them. And it took a moment of absolute magic from Harry, as you said. I mean, Jesus, how many times are we going to see this guy do that? Like, I'm so in this mindset now of just embracing every single moment, every single little thing that he does that is just incredible, because it won't go on forever. Like, it's not like just... enjoy this now. Like, enjoy having a player on the pitch that when you think, right, we can't get through him, he just suddenly decides to just, I'll just grab this game by the scruff of the neck and just go and win. And I'll go and win it for us. And then 2 minutes later, you're seeing him pick up the ball off Davinson Sanchez, like almost at centre back, and he started like pinging off 60, 70 yard passes. You're like, we're so lucky to watch this guy. It's just crazy. And if he breaks a record this weekend, man, I mean,
it almost feels like it's all kind of set up,
set
up for this point, right?
Just so long as it's not in like a 4-2 defeat. Imagine.
I don't want to consider that one. He's already had the mask goal ruined by them equalising. Although I don't. Do you know what? A lot of people say I don't buy that. It was still a sensational moment. It's the best goal I've ever seen live.
Oh, mate, I'm so jealous that you were there.
The explosion in that... Remember those... I mean, I know people will always look back on kind of... I mean, I won't say rose... lily white tinted spectacles of the old White Hart Lane and say, oh, it was great, it was rocking every week. No, it fucking wasn't. There were still times when people... when it was shit.
There was a lot of moany people on the bad days, wasn't there? There was a lot of them.
But... And I'm sure the new ground will get there one day. I'm sure it will. It's got to find its feet. It's still, it's still new at the end of the day. There was some of those nights, man. Some of those nights at the old White Hart Lane. Games, days, nights, whatever. Games. Let's say games. Some of those games at the old White Hart Lane when it was just there. Like, think about like 14, 15, 16, 17. But even some of those times like when the Yol era started and we started to get good. And when we started getting back into Europe and stuff like that, there was a certain like, and I generally don't like this kind of mawkish stuff, but there was a certain magic about that old ground, and you could just feel it shaking. And I remember that with that Kane goal, I've never felt White Hart Lane like it. We're chasing down Leicester. We think we're gonna win the fucking Premier League this season. And this boy wonder, who the jury's still a bit out on, sort of, is it just still a hot streak? In a North London derby, cuts in from the fucking wing and slams the ball into the top corner past the goalkeeper. I just think everyone was like, oh my God, we've arrived. And obviously we hadn't, so, it makes it even more painful. But still, in that moment, you can't take away from that moment because of what happened after the point. In that moment, you felt those things, and there's no taking away from that. And we shouldn't be so quick to just, discount good things, because...
That goal, there was kind of like it's not the same. Obviously, the goal at the weekend was literally is it far more kind of like simple by Harry Kane standards, simple finish, but he has that wonderful technique where he sort of arcs his body on those and feeds them into the far corner. And then I remember what you were saying about the kind of explosion of the fans, because there's this pregnant pause where the ball's in the air for about half a second and everyone's thinking, that's looking good, that's going to fly, like that's going in the corner. And then suddenly you just... I mean, the goal against Arsenal, you hear that crack of the post, don't you?
Yeah, it's mate, it's just like, get that right in my veins,
directly in. Yeah. And then, I mean, at the weekend he does it again, and like he's sort of on the slip as he's doing it, but it just arcs so perfectly, and you see the despairing dive of the keeper, and then the entirety of the south stand just jumps to its feet, and you're just like, yeah, this is what it's about. And the thing is as well, the thing that I know it's a phenomenal goal in another ways, like fairly flat game. There weren't too many other chances, but defensively, like I don't know, what one sort of weird semi bicycle that Forster made a comfortable save from. We weren't challenged at all. Like I never felt we were going to concede in that.
Oh, let's we've sort of done a bit about Harry Kane, so let's talk about one of the stars of potentially tomorrow, Pape Matar Sarr. I mean, there's going to be naysayers, and I've already seen them. I've already seen the whole, like, don't get excited about this. He's only done well against Crystal Palace, and he's only done well against Portsmouth. The boy looks pretty special, doesn't he?
Mate, I am not having anyone sort of play it down. If you want to get excited about a young player, and you want to get like hyped up about someone who you think the ceiling is sort of so high that they could go on and become truly elite, why stop? You know, the only thing you're going to do by making more noise around them is make him more confident and more excited. I'm so in on Sarr. I feel like even just watching him warm up, he sort of has that kind of streak about him where he can be sort of bit nasty in the challenge. He's so physically good. The way that he robbed the ball off Zaha the other day against Palace, and then sort of just strode out of defence. Just like, this is what we're desperate for, players like that, because playing in this system with a two in midfield, like your midfielders have to be everything. They can't just be a luxury creative player, and they can't just be a stopper. They've got to do the whole thing. That's why we've fallen in love so much with Ben Haines now that he's sort of added goals to his game as well, because he's a dynamo, he's scoring goals, he's got a great eye for a pass, he's nasty in the challenge too. But the thing about Sarr is it just looks so good. Do you know what I mean? It's so pleasing on the eye, the way he sort of like struts around the pitch, and the way that he controls the ball. His range of passing is brilliant. Like he's a real player. I think we've got such a gem in our hands there. And it's just sometimes... I think it was Spooky tweeted earlier on saying thank you Ben Haines for getting injured so Gareth Bale could become the player that he became.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could be watching that now, you know, that Bentancur gets an injury, Højbjerg comes back from the World Cup, is a bit knackered, Skippy sort of like not quite fully fit, and then Yves Bissouma gets a knock and is not quite fully there either. So Sarr's getting a concentrated run out, and he's just, honestly, mate, I think he's one of those ones that I think probably on TV he looks good. I think when you're there, you can't help but be drawn to him. Sort of, you know, when you do the kind of individual player cam, like you can't take your eyes off what he's doing, because he's so good to watch. I know you said the other day, I know you're quietly quite pleased with him as well, and you don't want to go too far, but I'm with you, mate. I think he's going to be special.
I just think one of the big things, right, with young players, you can see it, and I think Devine has this as well. Even in the few moments we've seen him, right, they step on the pitch and they're just like, yeah, I fucking belong here, and they carry themselves in that way. You know, you can see like there's no like weight on Sarr's shoulders. He's not kind of timidly thinking, oh, do you mind if I tackle you, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? He's just like, fucking try and take the ball past me. Go on. You know? And I think people look, because he's baby faced, right? He is baby faced, and he's quite skinny, but he looks rock solid as well. He looks hard, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say physically he's probably got a little bit of a way to go, but when he adds that in as well, I mean, it's not as if he's getting bounced by anyone.
No.
That's the thing. He looks perfectly comfortable with the kind of physical attributes of it, and I think there's a really, really nice thing in young players, like you were saying, when you see them sort of think like, I'm gonna have a go at this, like I'm gonna try and bounce someone 50-50, and occasionally they'll just get thumped, won't they? Occasionally they'll get sent flying, and I remember it happening to Skippy a lot of times, and God knows we're seeing it with Brian Hill at times. But I love the fact that we've got some really, really confident young players that at the moment just they like challenging themselves.
Yeah.
They like sort of saying, yeah, I'm going to give this a crack now and see sort of almost kind of benchmark myself. And the thing is, you can see with Ollie Skip's young as well, but you could see with him at the weekend, he loves the dirty side of the game. Do you know what I mean? He absolutely...
He's a little horror, isn't he?
Oh, beautifully horrible. You know, it's just wonderful. Like, and you need that. You need that.
And we shouldn't forget about, it doesn't need to be a competition between Sarr and Skip, and you need a squad. If now is a time that people should be realising this, right? You need a squad. And I think Skip, yeah, okay, he has looked a bit rusty. I will say that, but he's still done a job. Sarr's doing a job. Hill's doing a great job, I think. I think Hill's a very talented player. I'm not as convinced his future lies at Tottenham Hotspur, but that's just me speculating. He's kind of got that feel about it. He's got that feel of like maybe going back to La Liga about him.
He's so technical, isn't he? He's so technical.
Yeah, but I'd love to see... My main thing about him, though, mate, is I like watching Brian Hill play football. I like players like him because there's a certain like it's funny. There's a certain like element of Aaron Lennon about him. There's a certain element of like Luka Modric about him. Like he's sort of somewhere in between the two. And I'm not, before people say, "Oh, you're saying he's as good as Modric and Lennon." No, I'm not. I'm just talking about like the playing styles and what he brings to the game. I like the way that he seems to sort of dribble with purpose, and I like the crispness of his passing and the sureness of it. That little kind of that it was an assist really through to Kane, through an eye of a needle, and then obviously, I think when we were talking about this kind of off air, you were saying like, but you imagine being a player like Pape Matar Sarr, Brian Hill, Oliver Skip, and thinking, I'm playing balls up to Harry Kane.
Yeah, if I'm ever in trouble, like, that's my outball. The guy who just doesn't lose it when you sort of smash it at his face and he somehow like drops it down off his nose onto his foot perfectly. It's just he's a ridiculous player, but he also drags these performances out of other players who then sort of can walk that little bit taller. And I mean, it's not. I don't think there's any. It's not by chance that Brian Hill looks particularly good in Europe in Champions League games when he comes on. The game's a little bit stretched, and also the tempo of the game's a little bit different. The Champions League is a slightly more technical game and a slightly less physical game, slightly more strategic and tactical. And Conte's spoken so much about the fact that he really, really understands the game.
He's born to play football, he said, didn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, like some of the comparisons and stuff that he's making is like, I know at the moment there's this really, really, like, again, the Conte stuff at the moment is going on in terms of all of the stuff in the media, the contracts, the press conferences and everything. That's so difficult to compartmentalise and not kind of talk at the same time as the football. But the one thing that I do trust with Conte is that if he says a player is a player, if he says someone like Brian Hill has got like an incredible understanding of the game, he's not saying that just for the sake of it. He's not just saying, like, I do trust that he's saying, like, we have got a gem on our hands. It's just, I get the impression with Brian, it just might take a little bit longer. It's good, like, you feel like he would benefit massively from going and playing for somewhere else where he's one of the better players in the team and he's relied upon, and people are desperate for him to create something. And I mean, like, I always come back to Jack Grealish, right? He was saying in an interview the other day that when he was at Villa, he was asked to go and find the weak link in the opposition. He was asked to go. I think it was Dean Smith saying that you go and you find where there is a target in the defence and then you go and play against that player. So he could be anywhere all over the pitch and he would go and attack that player. Now for City, he's in Pep's machine. He has to hug the touchline and not to move. Like, you do one job in that system. And for players like Brian Hill, I get the impression they would... Like, he's a player that would benefit from the idea of a coach being like, right, you just go and be creative. Go and cause havoc. Wherever you go, you're so good on the ball. Just go and make opportunities for a forward. In this system, like, this Spurs system is rigid, you know. He's got very little flexibility in terms of being able to just go wherever he wants. If he tried to just pop up on the other side of the pitch, you can imagine Conte would be like, okay, sub please. But like, it's one of those things that right now he's going to have to make do with the fact that he's a bit in and out. I think the difference for someone like Sarr is that now, if someone said to me, oh, by the way, it's Sarr starting in central midfield this weekend, I'd be like, yep, cool, I'm down. You know, I'm there. Like, he's convinced me that this is... If it's Ben Haines,
I actually agree with you. You know, I do, because I don't know. Thomas Partey is a mean opponent for a young player like that. He's a mean man in many other senses as well. But he but still, yeah, you do kind of have that faith in Sarr that he can do a job on Hill as well. Another thing I do want to, because I know I was sort of saying I don't think his future lies at Tottenham. I don't want that to manifest, and I'm not trying to manifest this by any stretch of imagination. And I do feel like I need to give him more praise. Like, one of the things that I've sort of said quite openly, even when he was getting like Europa Conference minutes and when he's been getting some minutes in the Champions League, how happy I was to see him play and getting like pelters, like, you call that playing, blah blah blah, you know, that type of thing. What I will always give him, that I get it. He's like, the physicality he does need to adapt to more. I appreciate that, but he doesn't stop trying. He doesn't let that kind of like overwhelm him. I don't feel that he's scared going into games. He gets up, he sort of bangs the turf and gets back into it again.
I love that.
Like,
I love that.
He is a little terrier. I do like that about him. And I don't know if you've seen, he's said today that he wants to repay Antonio Conte for giving him more minutes now. Let me find the quote. He's giving me minutes and I have to repay his faith. Everyone needs time to adapt. I've worked hard for this moment. I hope I'll keep getting these minutes and keep improving. You know,
I think what you say is so true, isn't it? Because we've seen so many times. I know the Fighting Cock boys have spoken about this a lot, but him just getting clattered and sort of like being kicked up in the air, smashing into the turf, and then you sort of think, oh god, he's like, that could be him completely crocked, and he just bounces up and goes again. Like, I love that energy and that enthusiasm, that dynamism. I know that look, right now he's a million miles off of Kulusevski, because Kulusevski is he is so special when you consider his age. He's a ridiculous player.
Mate, he's one of the best. He's one of the best young players in world football. He is. He just is.
But it's not a criticism to say that he's miles off of Kulusevski, because Kulusevski is miles ahead of most players. But there's so many of the younger guys, they've just got a bit of a chance at the moment. Like, this few weeks, there's a lot of games. There's another FA Cup tie to come at the end of the month. Like, this is your opportunity. This is your window. This is where you've got to go and grab it. I just really hope that we kind of get to the end of this period and we're thinking about a few more players. Like, if, for example, someone needs a rest or someone's injured, that as a group of fans, we're thinking, I'm excited to watch Brian tonight. I'm excited to watch Sarr tonight. I'm excited to watch Skippy tonight. I know we kind of have that optimistic view anyway, but I would just like it to be a bit more firm. Do you know what I mean? You see Brian Hill on the team sheet and you think, yeah, this is what he's going to bring tonight, as opposed to having that, I hope he takes this opportunity.
It's mad about, like, on Kulusevski, because I don't need any excuse to sort of wax lyrical about him. It's mad to think that he's about 6 months older than Harvey White. You know?
I mean, it's stupid. It's stupid, isn't it?
Honestly, in my eyes, he's already better than like Foden and Saka. I think he's like, we don't really need to make these comparisons, but he is such a special player.
Well, and also he's got stuff they haven't as well. He's got stuff because they're all lefties, right? And they're all quick and they all got very, very good control. But the thing with Kulusevski is that physically, I just think he dominates those two. Do you know what I mean? The fact that he's as tall as he is, but still has the pace that he does, and the range of passing, the ability to open his body, and just I think he's so good. I'm hoping that that Conte's just kind of said, look, take another week and be ready to go for the weekend.
Please,
But they had 2 days off. Like, this is another interesting thing. So off the back of the Portsmouth game, he gave them 2 days off, that's rare for Spurs. So we've been quite fortunate in terms of the timing of this. We played so early on Saturday. There's another thing to remember. 12:30 kickoffs are a nightmare. They're an absolute nightmare. It is by far and away, with the exception possibly of Friday night, it's far and away the worst time to have a game on a weekend. Think if you're a professional player trying to get your routine right for a 12:30 kickoff when you're used to playing at 3 in the afternoon or 5:30 or 4:30 on a Sunday. Like, it's just absolutely rubbish. But to think that we got through it and then Arsenal won't play until Monday night, it's a massive advantage.
Preston North End next. You don't want anything other than the strongest 11 available, right?
Yeah, to some extent. Like, the way that I'm thinking it's, at this stage, it's just a case of, like, being completely ruthless with those games. Not kind of overthinking this idea that, maybe you put, like, a second string out and we bring players on to get us through it. I don't mind if you if Antonio sort of makes maybe a couple of changes. For example, if Bentancur and Højbjerg are fully fit, if come Preston North End we're looking at Basuma and Sarr as your midfield two, or maybe one of Højbjerg and Bentancur and Sarr, and then maybe it's one change in the front three, or perhaps one change at the back, that's absolutely fine. But as I said earlier on, it's just like, get through these games, keep getting good draws and get through these games, do whatever it takes to get through it, and make sure that we're in the hat for the next one. If the draws are good, I just don't want us to be left in this situation where we're kicking ourselves again for dropping out of the FA Cup at a stupid point. I don't want to get to the semi-final stage and see that there's 4 teams that are not in the top 4 in the semi-final and think, why didn't we just play a stronger side and get through?
The game that follows Preston is Man City anyway, and if we were to lose against Man City this season, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it, but
The one we got with, like, if we win this weekend, you sort of think, okay, well, we've done Man City the favour that they need. We've done them as I know it's all very kind of what's ifs, maybes, and all of that, but if we were to win this weekend, City go within 2 points. They can then do the rest themselves. Do you know what I mean? They've still got 2 games to play against Arsenal. They can do the rest themselves. They can, if they beat Arsenal twice, it's done. They shouldn't. City have just been a bit whiffy, haven't they, recently? Dropping points where they shouldn't do.
Did you see them the other night? I think they're better without Haaland in the side, mate.
Oh my God!
It's one of those stupid things to say, but like, when he's not scoring an obscene amount of goals, admittedly, he doesn't really do anything.
He's shit when he doesn't score a hat trick. It's a joke. It's so funny. I mean, the team that really, if you're a Chelsea fan at the moment, I'm taking great joy in the fact that Chelsea fans must be very, very concerned.
Well, I'm also taking great joy in the fact that Graham Potter thought he was too big for Tottenham, and this is what happens, Graham.
Unlucky, Chief. Okay.
Yeah, it's just the way it goes. Yeah, I mean, I just want to see Harry Kane with the trophy. We've even got. We'll talk about Gareth Bale in a minute. There's even pictures of Gareth. Yeah, I've seen a few people be like, he didn't win anything at Spurs. Actually,
yeah.
If you look at the League Cup photo, there he is on the side with his crutches.
Yeah, but does that make him automatically... Are you automatically then a serial winner? Because you were like on crutches at the time that Spurs won the League Cup. Do you know what I mean? That's the ridiculous metrics that we seem to have for footballers nowadays. Like, I really enjoyed what you said about Harry Kane the other day. You're going to tell me that Fraser Campbell had a better career because he won a Prem? Like, come on. Like, this is not... It's just not how it functions. It's not how it works.
Diego Forlan.
Exactly. I just... It feels like after that, we can all just breathe a sigh of relief because we don't need to be so fiercely defensive of him. If he wins an FA Cup at Spurs, it's like, no, he did it. He did it at the team that everyone has a go at for not being able to get over the line. If he wins the FA Cup at Spurs, that's enough. You know, that's enough. The other day we were interviewing David Howells, and David Howells was saying to me, he was like, I didn't have an amazing career, but I won the FA Cup with Tottenham Hotspur. Like that, I'd have done anything for that as a kid. You know, I was like, God, that's so true. To write your name into the history of Tottenham Hotspur as a football club, you can do anything after that. You kind of like come back to Spurs every single weekend. You'll never struggle to find someone who'll buy you a beer. Do you know what I mean?
No, it's please. Right, that man, Gareth Bale, he's retired today. Probably Britain's greatest ever footballer. I think you'd be hard pressed to argue otherwise. I mean, I think the biggest regret I have about it is that we weren't there to see his return. You know, I feel almost robbed by that.
No, we were. Absolutely we were.
And I feel robbed also that Mourinho didn't play him more, to be honest. But
God, his return as well was like 16 goals, wasn't it? 34 games, something like that. And people wanted to try and pretend that wasn't a good era for him. He's almost 1 in 2, considering that Mourinho was barely playing him. Like I remember vividly you saying at the time, "This is fan fiction." Son, Kane, Bale, like as a front three, and we had a couple of games in that period. I think we had a 4-0 win over Palace, maybe, and a 4-0 win over Burnley, if my memory serves correct. And there was a game where Bale scored, Kane scored that sweeping shot where the ball got kind of played back to him. He sort of swept it across into the top corner. And I think Sonny might have got an assist for Kane at the end where he kind of headed it back for Kane to head down and in. And you just think that there's a possible world, there's another world out there where it wasn't Jose Mourinho who's in charge at the time. And instead of looking at sort of having Gareth Bale as a curse, he saw it as a blessing.
Yeah.
And thought, right, I'm just going to, in games, I'm going to find a way to get these 3 unbelievable talents together, and I'm going to structure a defensive midfield that allows those 3 to just tear it up and do whatever the hell they want. And it just, I feel like...
He didn't like not being the main event, mate. That's in my... I know it sounds like ludicrous kind of fan takes. Jose Mourinho didn't like the fact he wasn't the main event at Tottenham anymore when Gareth Bale got signed. And I honestly think it's something as pathetic as that. I genuinely think the guy's ego is that wild that he just couldn't take the fact that somebody like Gareth Bale could walk back into the club, probably not really be in awe of Jose Mourinho, fuck about a bit on the training pitch, do these fucking basketball videos and fanny about with Ben Davies and stuff like that, but still go out on the pitch with his legs half working now compared to what they used to, still just rip it up, you know? And I do think guys like Mourinho in particular, really, he just can't really take that. His ego can't handle that. And I was never really that fucking... I honestly don't think we saw the worst. I personally don't, I don't really want to bring this one up again, but I don't feel that we saw the worst of Mourinho at Tottenham. I don't think we did. But even just little hints at it like that, like how he kind of was with Bale, I just sort of think, fucking just go, you know? Well, get out.
The point you make about Gareth Bale coming back and being able to not sit there. Gareth Bale won more Champions Leagues than anyone in the country at that point. Do you know what I mean? It's like literally no one can tell him how to affect a game or how to carry himself to affect a game. Like the guy knows what he's doing. But we saw at the time with the documentary, we saw Mourinho giving these sermons to people like Delhi. Can you imagine him, like Bale coming back and then him being like, right, sit down, Gareth, let's have a chat about how your career's going to go. Bale be like, well, honestly, mate.
Better than yours, mate. Like,
yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Honestly, like, what are we doing here? Yeah. But I just, even, the thing was, is that period, even that was special. I know we only got 1 game, did we, where he would have been where he would have been on the pitch with about 4,000 or 5,000 fans, and in the game against Leicester on the last day of the season where he scored to get us into Europe. But the period before, I mean, we were watching. It was one of those things where you're pinching yourself and you're like, we're watching the best in the world do it every week at White Hart Lane. Like, watching those goals where he was just picking the ball out on the right-hand side and then just drifting and smashing it in from, like, 30 yards. You're like, he's taking the piss. He's taking the piss. Like, this is ridiculous. Every bloody week he's doing this. And you were just... And I remember that was in, like, AVB sides that were doing nothing. Like, the team was doing nothing and the ball would get switched out to Gareth Bale on the right-hand side and you just think, probably going to score now.
Do you remember the one when Luke Shaw was, like... He was
exactly what I was thinking of.
One of the exciting big prospects, playing at Southampton, came through their academy. People sort of saying this lad's going to be like, future England left back. He's unbelievable. It's going to be a good tussle between him and Gareth Bale today. And he actually did a number on Gareth Bale for most of the game until like the last few minutes when Bale just basically dinked it past him and twatted it in from genuinely about 35 yards. And that was when he was just Terminator Bale, when he was just unstoppable and he was just kicking the ball from anywhere and it was going in. And I remember one of the Southampton fans
yes,
tweeted,
I'm so glad you remembered this.
they tweeted like Luke Shaw being like, everyone says you're good and you were shit today, you lost Gareth Bale. And I think Shaw replied like, mate, it's Gareth Bale. It was something. What was it? I can't remember exactly.
I'm looking for the tweet now, but it was like, it was so poetic because the fans said, "Why didn't you close down Bale for the goal?" And then Shaw just replied, "I tried." ...
Yeah.
Like, imagine that, like literally people talking.
I think Shaw was like 17, 18 at the time. Like.
Just the knowledge that you're like, I'm going to do everything in my power to try and stop this guy and it will not be enough. Like, he was that good that literally you could be one of the best young defenders in the country and it still won't be enough to stop Gareth Bale because if he wants to, he'll destroy you. Like, that's unbelievable.
What's your... what do you think? I mean, there's plenty of them, mate. There's plenty of the moments. But what for you is like the ultimate Spurs, Gareth Bale... get it in my veins moment?
So I have three. So the first one is the goal against Stoke away when he scores the volley where he like dislocates his entire leg and then just
how do you even do that?
Yeah, I know. Like, if I tried to do that, mate, I'm looking at surgery and being out of any sort of sport for the next year. And then the next one is the goal against Arsenal. Well, it's kind of like the goal against Arsenal and the goal against Chelsea that were around a similar time when he was sort of coming into that era and you thought, oh, in big games now, he's just he's the guy. Like in the big games, he'll just get it done. And then the West Ham one. I mean, the West Ham one because it was so late in the game and he was just in that. He was in that kind of mindset that we were talking about Harry Kane earlier on, where you just sort of thought wherever he is, he'll just pick up the ball and just go and spank it. Like it doesn't really make a difference. You can try and mark him if you want, but this is happening. So good. What about for you? What was your one?
Well, I mean, the main one, mate, it's got to be the Champions League game, Taxi from Icon.
Yeah, I mean, that was magic, wasn't it?
Again, it's kind of like, remember Kane, I think it's like Kane's game against Chelsea on New Year's Day. I remember people saying like that's his Gareth Bale against Inter moment. That moment when people are suddenly like, oh, this kid is legit. Like, he's unbelievable. And I remember it was the first time in my life. What I would say about Gareth Bale, because I don't know how old I was at that point. Probably 22, 23, I guess. I can't. What was the year? When
Spurs played against
Inter Milan.
Was it 2012? Am I making that up?
2012. So it was 2010. 2010. Yeah. I can't remember how old. Probably 24, 25. And I just remember even at that age, like, we'd had some great players. Don't get me wrong. We'd had obviously like Teddy Sheringham, David Ginola, players like that. But I just remember that the kind of obviously seeing the away game at Inter, but there was still that air of like, well, they were tired and they were a few goals up, and do you know what I mean? Like you could sort of think, oh right, well, a sort of tricky young player can. A hat-trick's pretty phenomenal, to be fair, but still, one summer doesn't a swallow make type thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then suddenly seeing that game against Inter Milan at home and how he just turned up and the thing is that it's one of those things that gets lost in the kind of like the sands of time. But what people forget is Maicon was like the best right back in the world at this point. It was Gareth Bale's, it'd be good luck to the young man tonight, but he is up against Maicon. And seeing him not just like get the better of him, terrorise.
Yeah, just ended his career.
Terrorise him. Like, basically did end his career. Terrorise him for the duration that we were both on the pitch together. And just thinking, like, fuck. I've grown up seeing all the stars at, like, United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, and all this. This really, truly is the first actual, legit, proper superstar that Tottenham have ever had. I've had in my lifetime in the Premier League era, and just watching that and thinking like, oh my god! And you're suddenly so excited. You're suddenly like, I cannot wait to see him play every single. I cannot wait to see him do this to everybody.
I've got a horrible question for you, but if you could go back in time and watch one team play 190 minutes, and you had to choose between Harry's team that had Bale, Lennon, King, Dorse, like Modric, Parker, Van der Vaart, and then your choice of one of the brilliant strikers that we had at the time, or peak Poch's like unbelievable pressing side, which side would you go back and watch?
Well, I feel that Pochettino's team was better. But the problem is, right, Redknapp's team, they were the first. Joel's team were great, Joel's team were great, and we were good at that point. But that Redknapp side was the first time that Tottenham were a proper outfit.
Oh, they were the business, mate, weren't they?
It was breaking ground, first time they were a proper outfit since the 80s, all right? Let's say then. And it's hard to replace the sort of things that I felt back then. Seeing that, and it is one of those things like, you do sound like you sound like the boring old man now, but it's like, one of the points I always bang on about here, and I think most of the people, to be honest, I think most of the people that listen to this really are about my age anyway. But for anyone that is younger that listens to it, it's so hard to like really make the point as to quite how shit Tottenham were in the 90s and the early noughties, and the thought of seeing Tottenham play a Champions League group stage and get knocked out in the group stage, that you thinking that's a dream for what if I see that before I die, we're golden. Do you know what I mean?
We've done it. You get that experience, and it will never leave you. But the thing is that we went and did that, and then some. And you were watching a player like Rafa van der Vaart just absolutely turn it on the European night. He was one of those players that he might be absolutely knackered after 60 minutes, but my God, those 60 minutes in the Champions League that he would turn up for. And Modric as well. Yeah. Like Modric in the Champions League. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Ledley,
we talk about Ledley as like, he's like the club's kind of son, right? He's that guy that is, for all of us, he's Spurs royalty. And that was his era. That was the best team he ever played in. So when you talk about like, oh, Ledley, your favourite moments in a Spurs shirt, granted he's going to talk about the League Cup win as well, but that group of players where he was playing one game a week and then spending the rest of the week in a swimming pool just so his knee would deflate in time for him to play the next one. Like, that was Bale, Modric. It was Lennon whizzing down one wing. It's a mixture of Pavlyuchenko, Peter Crouch, Jermaine Defoe, sort of like such a incredible period of time. And then on the flip side, I think what you had with Pochettino is you had like this much more holistic thing. It felt like everyone was an organism within an organism. Everyone was a part within the machine, and it was probably less flashy with individuals, but far more kind of impressive on the eye overall. But nothing can take that. I just, for me, like nothing can take away that the kind of individuality of that Redknapp team. Just knowing that one night it might be Van der Vaart that did it, another night it might be Bale, another night it might be Modric. It was just so good.
It's just, but it's one of those horrible questions because it's without one we don't have the other, because Pochettino's team went on another level from Redknapp's, and we've had some wonderful. I mean, Ajax is the best night of our lives. Let's be honest. It's an unbelievable memory. But there was just something about that kind of... It was kind of like, at that point... And this isn't taking anything away from it. I'm just trying to make the point about the Redknapp side, is that with the Pochettino team, we were already a good team that went on to be a great team. With Redknapp's, it was suddenly like, well, we've had this like nightmare with one day Ramos. We've kind of had a little flirtation with relegation. Shows that Tottenham aren't invincible. And this is annoying because we've got these kind of players that we were hoping would come really good. And then Redknapp just came in, breathed a bit of life into it, and we were suddenly like, we're a proper team. We're a side.
Look at us now in the conversation for the title.
And that swashbuckling, it was probably proto Brendan Rodgers football. That's the thing with like Redknapp. It was proto Brendan Rodgers in that when it was good, and when it wasn't, it was fucking horrible. And we do gloss over that. There were some horrible results under Redknapp. When we kind of talk about people sort of, they dig out the board and they say, oh, well, we didn't back Redknapp properly and things. And, sometimes I think there's something in that. But at the same time, Redknapp's limitations did show at times. And it was good. We always had the good showpiece fixtures, but the ugly kind of games, we never really did that well in. But regardless of that, it was sort of the first... it was the first Tottenham team, like I say, in my mid-20s, when I'm suddenly like, we can actually dream a bit here. We can actually, like, the idea of not just getting in the Champions League, of like, maybe winning it, it sounds crazy to say, but you're suddenly like, maybe we can win a Premier League. Maybe we can win a Champions League. And having those kind of like, those feelings for the first time, it makes it sound like it's some sort of like footballing puberty, doesn't it? But
it does. And do you know what adds to that? Like, there's always, for me, forever, that asterisk by that team that Peter Crouch got sent off away at the Bernabeu.
Yeah.
I always feel robbed of two. I feel like at that point we were like that kid in year 10 who's kind of like sort of hit puberty and suddenly got a bit tonk. And like the sixth formers used to give him a hard time, and then suddenly he's like, "Nah, come on, like let's go." Like,
and the sixth form was always a bit like, "Oh shit,"
Like, actually, he might be quite hard. Like, apparently he boxes, sort of thing. Like, is that sort of thing? And we suddenly got to that point, and then not to have a go at Crouchy because I love Peter Crouch, but I felt like we were robbed. That team was robbed of the chance to give Real Madrid a bloody nose, and just kind of like make that mark, I mean, we got to do it with Inter Milan, but I just feel like they deserved one more big kind of like big night, It was
just it's annoying. It's another it's kind of, I think most teams would say, yeah, there's always this, but I think there's something uniquely painful about the Tottenham experience. That let's look at our Champions League final, 23 seconds in, and we get a dodgy penalty go against us, and you're just kind of like, man, I would have, even if we'd have lost, I would have liked to have seen us at least get a game,
Yeah, and sort of weird masochistic vibe, isn't there, being a Spurs fan?
It's
Can't
horrible.
help it. Not this year in the FA Cup, though.
No,
this year.
No. I mean, I guess, sort of in closing, mate, I think one of the things that's crazy really about this Gareth Bale thing that it's hammered home for me, and I've done a tweet to this effect, and it kind of touches on the stuff I was talking about with Harry Kane the other night in terms of like, just enjoy it. The mad thing is, man, like, I genuinely remember, like, back in the day, me being at literal sixth form, and, being one of those little peckers that loves every single... you love... But people talk... this is one of those falsities. People talk about, like, young people now, they don't really support clubs. They support Mbappe or Haaland or this. I don't think that's true. We always loved... Even when we were growing up, we loved Ronaldo, Zidane, all these other players.
Football Italia, mate.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and I just remember, like, playing sort of Championship Manager and at the time Pro Evo and all that sort of stuff, and just being so involved in football and getting excited about, like, players who are like your peers, around the same sort of age as you.
Yeah.
And I remember the hype, how excited everyone was about Gareth Bale, and watching, I think, because before YouTube was even YouTube, I don't even know if YouTube existed, something like Daily Motion or something like that, or downloading clips from LimeWire, which was a thing as well, you know. And I remember seeing his free kicks at Southampton when he did this weird sort of celebration where he would spin in the air, and you're like, fucking hell, how's this lad 15, 16, and he's scoring these free kicks in all right, it's the Championship or Division 1 as it might be. I'm not even sure if the Championship existed then. And vividly remembering this, and then vividly remembering the excitement when we signed one of these exciting young players. They usually go to Man United or whatever.
Yeah.
And this time we've signed Gareth Bale. And I remember being on an old Tottenham message board. And I remember something when I was all hyped about it, and some of the older lads were oh well, let's just fucking wait and see how he does in a few years. And then obviously his career really stalled at Tottenham to the point where Harry Redknapp, if we talk about Harry Redknapp's vulnerabilities, almost shipping Gareth Bale off to Birmingham for £1 million. Lest we forget that. Until I think Daniel Levy stepped in and stopped that from happening because they thought there was a player there, you know. So,
And I mean, we got when we then got it was kind of like a double win for us, because we got to see this unbelievable player, but also we got to see the emergence of him.
Yeah.
You know, we got to watch that kind of period where you go from being kind of, and it's a start for plucky young Gareth Bale today, let's see what he can do, like you said earlier on, to then the entirety of the pre-match montage on Sky Sports or BBC being only about Gareth Bale.
Yeah.
You know, it's you got to see that transition and that guy emerge. And then, do you know what? There was a little bit of me at the time when he left for Real Madrid, the fact that he was going to be the first 100 million player, that for me was kind of that's our 100 million player. Yeah. He's 100 million because he played at Spurs. You know, it was kind of sort of weirdly bittersweet. And I know a lot of people once a player leaves the club, he's no longer a part of the club. But I never stopped supporting him wherever he went after that.
No. And I remember that weird, awkward phase at first when I was a bit oh, fuck him, he's left. he was in all those new kit photos and stuff, and then he left anyway, and he walked out the ground wearing that stupid pink top and pink baseball cap.
Oh, God, yeah.
Nothing, I'm not trying to be toxic. There's nothing wrong with men wearing pink. It was a stupid top and a stupid hat, though, really.
But the timing was not ideal.
No, and just seeing him go, but then when you're seeing him tearing up, seeing him score that goal against the Copa del Rey final, against Barcelona, come on, man!
But when he scored against Liverpool,
when you hear it with the Spanish commentary as him running down, he
scored against Liverpool, and you're we're so used to him doing stuff like that. That's not a shock to. It's still unbelievable, but Spurs fans, it's
But there's a little. The thing is, and it's whatever. I don't care if it's fucking Tim Pot. There's a little bit of us winning, you know, when that happens.
100%.
There's a little bit. Seeing Modric, the pride I still feel seeing Modric, even if he did fucking want to sell us down the road for Chelsea, still knowing that we were the first team to take a punt on him, really, and look
his
where
his career is linked, and I love the fact that the Bale news about him retiring comes out, and they put all of the kind of montages online. You're watching Gareth Bale in a Spurs shirt. You know, people will talk about one of Britain's greatest ever footballers, and he became that at Spurs. There is joy in that, you know, and it would be a shame to kind of cut off your nose to spite your face and not admit it.
It's useless, mate. So the point I was sort of going to drive to is that it's just so mad, vividly remembering seeing his emergence to now seeing him retire. And and with regard to Kane, that's what sort of the point I was trying to make is just enjoy it, because I think it's, you know, getting to this sort of age now, my late 30s, I'm suddenly how's that happen? You know, like Mourinho was saying to Dele Alli that time, it just goes. It goes by in the blink of an eye. It really does. And things like this, hold it up, and Zeus on Twitter, everyone will know who he is. He's put it the best way, which is, Gareth Bale retiring has made me feel very old. We are all decaying day by day, hour by hour, and one day we're all going to be dead. Good player, though.
Perfect.